Hi, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher. Today we're going to talk about Browns Commanders, Ravens Bengals, Cowboys Steelers, Sunday night game. We'll wrap the show with our best bets. We have a special guest today. It is not Drew Dinsick, though he is here as well. It is Rob Pizzola, co-founder of the Hammer Network, co-host of Circles Off and Forward Progress. How's it going, Rob? How's your football season going so far?
It's been going pretty well, honestly. I had a really bad week too, but outside of that, it's been in the positive, so can't complain. Hit some big winners on some SGP so far this year, so I'm happy. I'm happy with where I'm at through a month of the season.
Okay, I love it. Let's dive straight in, and we'll start with two teams that have vibes going in drastically different, diametrically opposed directions. The Browns Commanders. Commanders are 3.5-point favorites. This was not the look ahead before the season. The total is 43.5. Where do you fall in terms of Commanders optimism at the moment, Rob? Some people now think that this is like a neutral team against average. Some people think that this is a legitimate top 5 offense. How high is the optimism on Washington?
Judging by Drew's face, we might be in disagreement here. So I think the sky's the limit for Washington's offense. And I know a lot of people will point to the strength of schedule this year for this team. And certainly it's been poor. They feasted on some weaker defenses and they've put up great yardage totals against, frankly, some of the dredges of the league. But I really like what I'm seeing out of Jaden Daniels. I think what Cliff Kingsbury's done with that offense, getting the ball out of his hands quickly, not having to read too much downfield, has really worked in his favor. I would push back a little bit on the strength of schedule thing because we hear this a lot when teams, get into these types of situations. We saw it with the Seahawks on Monday Night Football last week with their defense, where they had gone up against some poor offenses. They got destroyed by the Lions, but we have to account for the defensive injuries the Seahawks had in that game. It's not apples to apples. In this particular instance, the Commanders are far exceeding the offensive output against these poor defenses relative to the rest of the league. So you can play a bad schedule, but you can still really beat up on a team, even if you are playing a bad schedule. So to answer your question, Jay, I'm very optimistic about Washington's offense. Obviously, this will be a test this week. We get a Browns defense that's much better than what they faced. But overall, I really like the game planning from Cliff Kingsbury. And Jaden Daniels, to me, looks very comfortable in the pocket, not like a rookie quarterback whatsoever.
Okay. To push back a little bit on some of this here. And again, to be fully candid, I played Browns plus 3.5 earlier in the week. Once I saw the injury report yesterday, I regretted it. I think if there would have been a modicum of positive news about the offensive line for the Browns, then this would be like bet of the week. Like what market overreaction? Like, my goodness gracious, you'll never get another chance like this all season. So I think I've definitely cooled a little bit on my opinion here. But I will say that there are mainstream NFL properties out there that are covering Jaden Daniels as though he's the best quarterback in the NFC. And it's like, okay, he had 2 games in a row against very bad pass defenses with very positive game states. Like, can we get a full sample of him coming back on his team or playing a more difficult defense? We may not get that this week because the Browns really very tough defense to price right now. But, I've upgraded Washington more than any other team in the NFL to this point in the season, particularly their offense. I've downgraded the Browns more than any other team in the NFL that hasn't had a quarterback get injured. And yet 3.5 is too much. So, I mean, if the Browns can play any semblance of competent offense, I think you could have a game state here that tests Daniels a little bit more. And if the Browns defense shows up and gives you an honest effort here, then this should be a pretty competitive game. But so I'm a little bit kind of on the fence here in terms of just how to handicap the Commanders, not just this week, but the next few weeks, because even if the Browns don't belong in the discussion of top 10 defenses anymore because of injuries and regression and all sorts of things, Commanders have the Ravens coming up, they have the Bears coming up, they got the Steelers coming up, and so we're going to have some true tests. When you see a performance like what you've seen from Daniels, do you have any inclination to anchor to a preseason prior at all, or do you just throw it out?
I throw it out completely. So my priors are different depending on the team. So quarterback and coaching situations. Some quarterback coaching combos have been together for years. I'll tend to stick to a prior for that team a lot later into the season than I will for someone like Jaden Daniels. So it's really tough to evaluate these rookie quarterback situations. Yeah, like I don't think he's the best quarterback in the NFC. It's within the realm of possibility that he is. Honestly, there's a probabilistically speaking, I think it's a low percentage. But I think my handicap on this game has a lot to do with the Browns, just as much as it has to do with Washington. So to me, I don't think Cleveland has been downgraded enough in market by people. And I watched a lot of Cleveland and the Raiders last week. I got stuck with a horrible number on the Raiders. So I was invested in that game. And Cleveland goes up 10-0 and they end up blowing it. And there's certainly some plays that are Deshaun Watson made in that game that will appear differently in the box score. One was a touchdown to Amari Cooper that got called back on a phantom penalty. One was a pass to Amari Cooper that went off his chest, went up in the air and got picked off by the Raiders. So there are some plays where you can point to where you're like, okay, Watson's getting a little bit unlucky. But even then, it's still a terrible offense behind a terrible offensive line. And that's the issue this week. I mean, you're potentially talking about missing 4 of your starting 5 offensive linemen going into the year if they don't get any tackles back. James Hudson is right now the worst left tackle in football in terms of pressure percentage. And everyone wants to focus on this Commanders defense, which it's bad, don't get me wrong, but they're coming off a game where they got pressure on Arizona and Kyle Murray. They went against a bad right tackle in Kelvin Beachum. They turned him into a turnstile. Like we're talking about catastrophic O-line injuries for the Browns with a team that can't run the ball like they could in past seasons and a quarterback who frankly just can't process all that quickly now. So it's double-sided for me. It's not just as much the Washington offense. It's also, I think the Cleveland offense is terrible. And I mean, if I wanted to go even further, I think the Browns defense is pretty overrated, honestly. Like we're looking at a team right now that's 12th in defensive EPA this year. They've played the Cowboys, the Jags, the Giants, the Raiders. That's the 7th easiest schedule of opposing defenses by success rate, 9th via EPA, and they're not even breaking into the top 10 right now. Aside from Denzel Ward, they have a corner on the other side of the ball that has just been killed all year through the passing game as well in Martin Emerson. So it's just as much for about the Browns for me as it is about the Commanders in this game. And I mean, my fare is like somewhere around Commanders -4 here. I could be very wrong. I mean, this is some guesswork involved with what Washington is right now, but I really think that we're slow to catch up on both of these teams.
Yeah, I think with the Commanders, you can't really fake a 53% success rate on offense through 4 weeks. The gap, that's the best in the league. The gap between them and Detroit in second is bigger than the gap between Detroit and the Rams in 9th. So it does, I think at some point, your strength of schedule counts as an adjustment, but if you're putting that up against any 4 NFL teams, I think that you can be projected as a top 10 offense the rest of the way. I agree with you, Rob, on Cleveland. I thought the last play from Deshaun Watson was pretty instructive of where he's at right now as a quarterback, where he thought physically that he could get away from the pressure and he could not. And no one was open as well to throw to. So I agree that offense is a bit of a mess. And if the defense is going to be 10th, 12th best instead of first best, then this is probably a 6-11 type of team. All right, dominate this NFL season with a Fantasy Life Plus subscription. Get weekly rankings, start sit advice, DFS analysis, and betting tools. Use promo code season20 for 20% off. Go to fantasylife.com/rotoworld to learn more. All right, big game in the AFC North. Ravens 2.5-point favorites against the Bengals in Cincinnati. Total is 49.5. Rob, I think a lot of people in the space now are treating the Ravens as the number 1 team in football in terms of their rating. Do you agree with that? Or are you still waiting a bit to the struggles that they had, particularly those first 2 weeks on the offensive line and a defense that doesn't look as dominant as last year?
Yeah, there's lots of moving parts in ratings over the course of the year. Baltimore's pretty healthy right now, so I can definitely see that. I still am very high on San Francisco, but they have a lot of injuries on defense where maybe you downgrade their power rating a bit for this week. In the long run, I prefer some other teams over the Ravens, honestly. Listen, there's no denying what Baltimore's done in back-to-back weeks, right? They smoke Buffalo. they smoked Dallas too. Let's call that out for what it was. Dallas mounted a comeback late in the game, but it was never really remotely close in that game. But it's the NFL, and like, we're very quick to forget this is a team that lost at home to the Las Vegas Raiders. Like, that happened in the NFL this year. So as much as we want to say, Baltimore's in top form right now, which they also can play that clunker sort of game. I'm not as convinced that a lot of the things we've seen out of Baltimore in recent weeks are that sustainable moving forwards. Derrick Henry's had a couple great matchups on the ground in a row with Dallas and Buffalo. I still am concerned about that O-line moving forwards. This game will be interesting because the Bengals defensive tackle situation has been a real problem for them this season. BJ Hill was practicing yesterday, which was good news. They might get him back. It doesn't really look like Trey Hendrickson is in danger of missing this contest, but it does seem like another game where Baltimore will have at least some moderate success on the ground here. And when they face opponents like that, they're going to look good in that type of situation. But if somebody cuts out this running game for that team, then it looks very different for them. So I don't really know where to put Baltimore right now. It's very matchup dependent, but I think it's a team with holes. O-line's an issue. And I'm not convinced the secondary, at least the cornerback play, is going to be as good season long as what we've seen so far this year. And especially when you consider the wide receivers on the other side this week, because they haven't been going up against dynamic wide receivers the last couple of weeks, right? The Bills really don't have that. The Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb, who, by the way, is not separating this year, and they have nobody else. Last time we saw them face receivers, they got cooked by Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers in that game, and the Raiders moved the ball on them in the second half. So lots of a wide range for what the Ravens could be on any given week.
I can't really disagree with that. I laid the Ravens 2.5 here, but I would intend to look for opportunities to bet the Bengals in game or second half if this is a competitive game, because a game script where the Bengals are forced to air it out feels a little sketchy that the Ravens are going to be able to put this thing away. This is not the Ravens team from last year that was just able to just steamroll teams and roll downhill despite the the Sunday night outcome. I still think there are some huge questions to be answered. The thing about the Ravens that surprised me the most, and this is from the great Mike Tanier this morning, they are actually subject to the biggest deficit right now in terms of net penalty yards. That totally caught me by surprise. Like, I've watched a lot of Ravens games and I was still like, wait a minute. Like, I know exactly what's going on with the Houston offense and Houston in general. But the Ravens right now have a net differential of 54 yards a game. The highest we've had in the last 5 years is 30 for any team. Right. So there will be, some natural regression there where just they get a little bit cleaner game state, a little bit, just some fewer penalties. And I'm very hopeful that the NFL takes their foot off the gas in terms of the procedural, offensive procedural penalties going forward, because it's really bogging down offense in general. But I thought, I think that the Ravens kind of opening scripts have been outstanding. I think that the Ravens can generate a lead in this contest. And so I don't mind laying the points with the Ravens despite being on the road here, but I would definitely actively manage my position if this Bengals team is getting good pass protection, because the Bengals offensive line falling a little under the radar. They're doing good. And I think the Ravens are a bit of a pass funnel, ? They certainly are amazing against the run, but I think there are still some questions to be answered against the pass.
Rob, how bad do you think the Bengals defense is right now? They're 27th in EPA per play as a defense. They are bottom 8 in both drop back EPA and rush EPA. It doesn't seem like this defense has any real strength outside of Trey Hendrickson. Do you think that is going to regress towards more respectably below average, or is this just a flammable defense that is going to be this bad all year?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit higher on the Bengals than market, because I think by end of the year, you'll see Cincinnati's defense somewhere in the range of like 20th to 24th in the league, and they'll kind of find their level a little bit. Defensive line injuries can be very impactful in the NFL, especially when they occur in clusters. When you're missing your starting 2 defensive tackles, that really opens things up for double teams on Trey Hendrickson, running the ball up the middle. It's just challenging to defend whenever you're missing multiple players at any position. So I don't think the Bengals have a good defense by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the metrics will slightly improve over the course of the year. Offensively is where I think that, I mean, it sounds really obvious, but throw out the first game of the season, right? T. Higgins out, Jamar Chase couldn't even play all the snaps in that game. Now they're starting to find their level, the Cincinnati offense. And the pass offense will be good as long as they can continue to protect Joe Burrow. So I think the Bengals are a little bit undervalued in the market right now. I could totally see this as a matchup where Baltimore does keep rolling because, listen, this isn't a great defense by any stretch of the imagination. They had a couple games against Baltimore last year where they lost those games. Lamar didn't put up big rushing numbers, but he actually threw the ball on them. So that could certainly happen again. But I'm a little bit higher on Cincy than I think everyone else is right now.
Not everyone else.
Okay.
There has been a general trend of betting unders in the Bengals games. I'm sure you've seen this. Like the Bengals get bet under every week, and it's happening again this week. This is on its way down from 51 to 49. Okay, good luck. I agree with you that once the dust settles at the end of the year, it's going to look better. And I don't love calling out specific players, but like the Bengals are trotting out some guys that are just flat out washed. The best, the most phenomenal play that we've had all season, besides the Tony Pollard touchdown, was Jaden Daniels deep pass to McLaurin. And the play that, like the big part of that play, was a guy that had no idea what his protection role was in Jeremy McNichols, just put Jermaine Pratt completely out of the out of the stratosphere. And it's like, okay, well, I guess Jermaine Pratt's not playable anymore. And Sam Hubbard, is he playing? I'm assuming he's out there. Like, I keep seeing him getting snap counts, but I'm not seeing him doing anything. And then, the absence of DJ Reader feels felt. And Logan Wilson doesn't seem to be the player that I thought he was. Von Bell might be a little bit on the wash side of things. So, I think if they kind of get some of their younger players who are currently on IR right now back into the mix, like Miles Murphy and McKinley Jackson, like these guys might not be good either, but at least kind of some young healthy bodies might help kind of bolster that unit. But until we see some turnover in personnel on the defensive side of the ball for this Bengals unit, I mean, I just tip my hat. Best of luck to whoever's betting these unders.
Yep. Still think there is scope for the Bengals to get back to elite status via the kind of Steve Nash, D'Antoni Suns avenue of being the number one offense and the number 17 type of defense. I think that is still in the cards. All right, it's an interconference showdown Sunday night in week 5. Catch Dak Prescott and the Cowboys take on TJ Watt and the vaunted Steelers defense in Pittsburgh. Coverage kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Okay, Cowboys at Steelers, Sunday Night Football. I will be on the field for this one, courtesy of NBC. I'm going to try find TJ Watt on the sideline, ask him how he feels about costing me my Micah Parsons 100-1 Defensive Player of the Year ticket in 2021. I'll say it to his face as well. I'm sure he'll care. The Steelers are 2.5-point favorites. The total is 44. Rob, you are a Cowboys fan. It's not been great so far for the Cowboys. Parsons, high ankle sprain. DeMarcus Lawrence on IR. It's Deron Bland out. Offensive line struggling a little bit. Do you think this is right now a below average team with the current healthily available players?
I would say that I do believe that. Pessimistic Cowboys fan for sure, and I always have been. That's just my nature, but extremely pessimistic for this matchup in particular because Dallas really struggles against teams that can run the ball and run the ball up the middle specifically on them. Last week, they shut down the Giants. The Giants don't have a good rush offense. Somebody might look at the Steelers' numbers this year in terms of run success and be like, well, the Steelers' rush offense isn't really that great. I think a little bit of that is opponent dependent as well. They have gone up against some teams that are good at stopping the run. Denver, the Chargers are both top 10 in the league right now in rush success rate allowed. Actually, so is Indy, who they've played. I'm really surprised by that. But ultimately, Steelers play a lot of 2 tight end sets. They play really safe. And they might not be the big play potential team that's going to expose the Dallas secondary, but I think they can methodically move the ball up the field. One issue with the Cowboys defense, over the years has always been against rushing quarterbacks as well, trying to keep those quarterbacks contained. You get that on the Steelers side of the ball. So I don't think this is a game where Pittsburgh goes out and puts up 30s. I don't think they can really do that on anyone with the style of offense they want to play. But definitely, I think they can move the ball here. And that puts Dallas in a situation where they have to rely on that offensive line with one of the worst left tackles in the game right now, without any secondary weapons, really. Like losing Brandon Cooks shouldn't be a big deal nowadays, but they just don't have other weapons around there. You look at CeeDee Lamb, who I mentioned earlier. I mean, he has some of the worst separation numbers in the league. His separation rate is 2.06 yards. That's second to last in the NFL. Steelers will play some man defense. They'll put a safety on him as well. They'll force the Cowboys to beat them in any other way. And I just don't know how Dallas does that, especially on the road where they're going to be using silent counts at Pittsburgh with TJ Watt on the other side. So I don't like the matchup for Dallas at all. I do think they're a below average team right now. And listen, the Steelers are not a team that I typically want to lay points with. We kind of, we know that they struggle to separate, but it would be only Pittsburgh for me in this game.
Gosh, I have so many questions for you as a Dallas guy. I kind of want to ask you about Dak and just how to rate him now, because I feel like he's a little underrated. He's played a lot of really good pass defenses so far this season. Giants, I think, are a little bit underrated as far as the defense in general. But I think maybe the right question here is, if you think that this is a below average team, there might be a bet on the board in the futures market that's just wildly mispriced. And it's yes/no playoffs for these guys.
Yeah.
You can get a no right now at plus 100 on the Cowboys. And all of a sudden, this feels like they might be like, if the dust settles and they're the 4th best team in the NFC East at the end of the season, would you be surprised? Probably not. Especially if this is an extended absence for Micah Parsons. And, you pointed out that CeeDee Lamb has been underperforming this year. So by the way, has Micah Parsons like significantly. I think I've completely count me as a complete no confidence vote in Mike McCarthy. And so I guess, is that the right angle to really kind of try to take advantage of the fact that the Cowboys maybe got away with a win last week against the Giants? That if they lose that game to the Giants, then I guess what? Plus 100 on playoffs no is not available.
Yeah. So I actually simulated this out yesterday because a friend of mine who you may be familiar with, Judah Fortgang, kind of talked to me about the same thing. And listen, there's some guesswork to do here with how long Parsons will be out for. It's a high ankle sprain. It's probably a couple weeks if I had to guess. I'm using the Twitter doctors as my, North Star here for trying to predict this stuff. But I simulated it out and I got a fair value of Dallas minus 136 to miss the playoffs based off of my current numbers. So at plus 100, I do like that. It should be noted, I am higher than market on Washington. When Philly's at full health, I'm higher on market on Philly as well. So that matters in my sims, but I don't hate that look. I really think that this team is due for, they just don't have a lot of secondary talent is what it comes down to. And that's a huge issue for them this year.
Yeah, I think there is an element as well with Dak where his entire career he's struggled against pressure, and then last year he was incredible against pressure, and that is just by nature extremely variable, I think. And I think that Dak for most of his career has been between the 8th and 12th best quarterback in the league, and I think last year between just thriving in those high variance situations under pressure, feasting on some bad defense. I think he just ran hot a little bit and finished, and he was a top 4 quarterback last year. And now with Guyton and Beebe really struggling at left tackle and center, and the fact that, to your point, CD not separating as much, there's just not a ton there. And then the defense has gone from a top 5 unit to right now a below average unit with all those injuries. So it all adds up to the Cowboys kind of hanging out for that bye week that they do have coming up in a couple of weeks, which we'll see. Hopefully at least Parsons and Bland get back on the field. All right, let's shift over to our best bets. Rob, you're looking at the Panthers-Bears game.
Yeah, so always scary when you're making a bet opposite of where the market has been moving, but sometimes that creates value. And the market's been betting the under pretty heavily in Chicago, Carolina. You always have to look at the weather at Soldier Field. We're looking at 10 to 15 mile an hour winds right now. Nothing that's going to be substantially affecting the total, in my opinion, in this game. So I'm going to look to the over here. I think Carolina still profiles very much as a big time over team for obvious reasons. You look at the defensive injuries they have. Now, is Chicago going to be the team that exploits that? Probably not going to score mid-30s are the Bears, but they've played 2 bad defenses in a row in the Rams and the Colts. They had some success. They're starting to get better going forwards. And also, if you watch those games back, there were lots of opportunities for the Bears on the field, especially downfield against the Rams. Caleb Williams just missed some throws. How often is he going to miss those throws going forwards? It remains to be seen. But ultimately, I do think there's actually a pretty high floor for the Bears offense in this game just because of the lack of personnel on the Carolina defense. They lose their linebacking core this week with Josie Jewell and Shaq Thompson both getting injured as well. So you take a defense that's already void of talent, remove even more talent, and that's a huge problem. On the other side of things, you get the Panthers into a game state where they're playing catch-up. They'll move the ball with Andy Dalton. They can. I mean, listen, it was just the Bengals defense last week. Looked good a couple weeks ago as well. But this is a decent offensive line. It looked horrible when Bryce Young was in there because he couldn't get the ball out and didn't know what to do. But with a veteran quarterback, this offensive line has really held up. And I just think that this number has moved a little bit too much for what we're dealing with here. So I had this closer to 43 as my total. Now that it's 41, a key number, I think that there's value on the over.
Oof, we are in strong agreement on this. I make this number 44. I, in general, think you probably only need 17 points out of Carolina to get this home because I really, really love the matchup for the Bears offense here. The absence of the linebackers for Carolina is, I think, being wildly underappreciated by market. They don't have a pass rush. If you look at what the kind of first quarter of the season has been for the Bears, they faced some teams that were quite good at generating quick pressure, most notably the Texans and the Rams. And I think in general, Caleb Williams has answered the questions that are asked in terms of doing well in getting quick passes out of his hand. I was a little bit blown away to break down the data in terms of just, well, why are Caleb Williams' numbers not better? Like, what's happening? Because it doesn't look like especially problematic unless you are only zeroing in on the big negative plays, in which case, yeah, he looks terrible. But on the quick passes, he's generating top 10 EPA per pass, better than other, same as the great next coming of Jaden Daniels, our next best NFC quarterback. Caleb Williams, almost identical EPA per play in passes under 2.5 seconds. So I think they're kind of figuring out the best way to utilize him. And if you can keep him in structure and keep him on time, and again, against the Panthers defense that doesn't have much ability to generate pressure, doesn't have a linebacking core to stop the run, I think this is going to be a pretty clean breakout type of game for Caleb Williams. And I don't know that I have like a huge long-term buy on the Bears right now. I'm not like really getting weird in the rookie of the year market or anything like that, where Williams is 8-1. But boy, oh boy, does he have a tasty next 4 weeks in terms of defenses he gets to face. Carolina, Jacksonville, Arizona. These are teams you should be able to put some serious pressure on. And I think Caleb Williams is starting to do enough. And the offensive line is starting to perform better as well for the Bears. And all of this, I think, will kind of bear fruit. So for those reasons, my play of the week will be Chicago -3.5. My fare on this one is close to 5.5. And again, I think there's a very reasonable case people come out of this game with scratching their chins about exactly how bad is this Panthers defense, and or they overreact to the Bears offense. But I also don't think that overreaction is going to be tested for a few weeks as they continue to face relatively soft foes.
Okay. Well, I will take us out of Carolina, Chicago. And my best bet is actually Nick Chubb, 25-1 to win comeback player of the year. I think he's the second most likely player to win, and he's being priced as the ninth most likely. But my best bet for this weekend is Jackson Smith in Jigba over 44.5 receiving yards. I'm baffled by this line. He is the 12th most targeted player in the NFL right now. He is playing more snaps than DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. He had 16 targets against the Patriots 3 weeks ago. He had 12 targets against the Lions. The game in between against Miami, he only had 3 because it was a fake game that they won 24-3. He is playing a ton. He's in the slot, which makes him extremely stable. The Seahawks have the single highest pass rate over expectation in the NFL. And I just think that in 2-3 weeks, JSN is going to be consistently priced in the high 50s and possibly even higher because just of the amount that he's playing, the amount that they're throwing, and the amount of targets that he's getting. So 44.5, I don't understand at all, and that is my best bet. All right, Rob, thank you very much for joining us, mate. Can you tell people where to follow you on social media and anything you want to plug at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. You can follow me at my Twitter handle at Rob Pizzola. If you're into NFL content, I'm sure you are because you're watching this. Check out my YouTube channel, Forward Progress, as well. Lots of good stuff over the course of the week. And we also do live watch-alongs of the primetime games as well. So if you're just looking to find some bets, relax on the couch, bet the in-game markets as well, check out Forward Progress.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for your time, Rob. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Cool. All right, well, we are done for today. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. Jay Crouch and Drew Dinsick. Thanks again to Rob Pizzola, and we'll see you soon.